All right, let's have a conversation about protagonists and kind of just understanding the concept of the protagonist. Now, in the realm of storytelling, your protagonist is pretty much your main character, meaning that the main action or the conflict of your story all kind of revolves around your protagonist. Now, that doesn't mean you don't have multiple sources of conflict or other characters that might have additional conflict that is either has to do with the protagonist or maybe it has nothing to do with the protagonist. It doesn't mean there's not other tertiary events going on, but your protagonist is basically the main character of your story. They kind of drive the narrative forward. Something happens to them that compels them along their journey. And there are many different types of protagonists in whether it be books, movies, TV shows, etc. So one of the main types of protagonist is the classic hero. They are the embodiment of bravery, integrity. They have a wonderful moral compass, unwavering desire to do what's right, to right a wrong in the world. They usually go on noble quests. They are a champion of justice, a beacon of hope in their respective stories. So, some of those examples of heroes you could say, Aragorn from Lord of the Rings is a hero. He's a fighter for truth and justice and, wants to save the realm. Harry Potter, a young wizard who has to face off against evil Lord Voldemort. It's kind of his destiny. He's on a quest. Superman. A lot of our superheroes are superheroes, right? So he has superhuman abilities, but he also has this innate sense of right and wrong, and he's definitely treads that path of good and righteousness. And so those are the heroes of the story. Now you can get into other types of protagonists, which I like personally myself, the anti-hero. Now the anti-hero, they're usually a little bit more flawed and they're a little bit morally ambiguous. They don't always have I guess their moral compass doesn't always point north. Sometimes it kind of wavers one way or the other. I mean, in general, we know that they're down in their core, they really are a good person. They just may make bad choices because they have flaws. I think they have a general disregard for, traditional societal norms, but they have their own code of ethics that they kind of follow. They're complex, but they are relatable. And the reason why they're relatable is because they do have more flaws than the hero. They can be unpredictable and challenge the reader's expectations. And so sometimes I do like a good anti-hero. Couple of good anti-heroes, like Walter White from Breaking Bad is a great example of an anti-hero. Deadpool is an anti-hero. Wolverine, you can throw him in there as well. One of my personal favorites, Captain Jack Sparrow. He is most definitely an anti-hero. He always ends up doing the right thing, but sometimes he goes about it in a very interesting manner or sometimes bends the rules to get what he wants. But he still has a code, the pirate code. And so he usually ends up, he's kind of a hero, but not really in the sense because, he doesn't have that moral compass. And he doesn't want to have a moral compass. And I think that's what makes the character interesting and compelling. The third type is a little more difficult, and you don't see it as often. I had a hard time coming up with some examples of this one. The false protagonist. So There are some good examples, but a false protagonist often emerges in the story. They're the initial focal point. You're focused on them. You believe that they are the protagonist in the story, but actually, it's the writer misleading um, the reader into believing that they are the main character when they're not. Um, these characters end up being later overshadowed, or they're revealed to be really secondary to the plot, or sometimes they end up dying early on. That's the big blow right there. I think the biggest one is, Game of Thrones. When you start reading Game of Thrones, you really think that Ned Stark is going to be the main character of Game of Thrones. He's going to be the protagonist, that hero for justice against, the evil Lannisters. But we come to find out, I mean, George R.R. Martin kills him off like very, very early in the series. And you're kind of like, okay, well then who's the protagonist? And that's a really good question. I don't even know that you can really choose a character from Game of Thrones that is the protagonist. There's many that fit the role at certain points in the story, but I don't know that there's an overarching protagonist or not. Tyler Durden from Fight Club, that's another one. You are getting to know this rebellious Tyler Durden. He appears to be the protagonist, and then the plot thickens to reveal that the unnamed narrative and the true character of the story, Tyler is the dark alter ego. So then it kind of throws the reader for a loop. So there are a few really good examples of that, but I think they're few and far between because I think they are more difficult to write. But I think that they are exciting for the reader to read. So take a look at your story and see if you can identify which category your protagonist falls into, or try to think of some examples of these different categories of protagonists.